My name is Kate. I'm 28 years old. And this happened 2 years ago, the day I finally understood that to my parents, I wasn't a daughter. I was an afterthought. A burden. A placeholder in someone else's story. That morning, I was glowing. Steve had just proposed after 4 years together. We'd been building a life from scratch, late nights at the café we started downtown, early mornings delivering orders ourselves because we couldn't afford staff yet. Every dollar felt like a seed we planted with our own hands. So when he slipped that simple diamond ring on my finger, my whole world caught fire in the best way. I couldn't wait to tell my parents. To tell them that their practical daughter was finally stepping into her fairy tale. That I was ready to use the wedding fund Nana had left me, $50,000, set aside when I was 15, the same gift she'd given Monica at 17. I drove to my parents' house rehearsing the words in my head. Steve asked. I said yes. We're getting married. I pictured Mom crying happy tears, Dad pouring champagne, Monica rolling her eyes but clapping anyway. I wanted that moment. I thought it was finally mine. When I stepped onto the porch, my hands were shaking with joy. I knocked, clutching the envelope that held the official paperwork for accessing my share of the fund. Mom opened the door. She looked startled, like she hadn't expected me. Her pearls were crooked, her lipstick fresh. Behind her, I glimpsed boxes stacked by the hallway wall. Moving boxes. Kate, she said flatly, not warmly. What are you doing here? I laughed, breathless. I have news. Steve proposed. We're getting married. I came to tell you first, and to go over the fund paperwork. I finally get to use Nana's gift. Her expression didn't change. Not a flicker of joy. Instead, she shifted uncomfortably, blocking the door like I was a stranger selling insurance. Dad appeared behind her, arms folded. He didn't congratulate me. He just sighed. Kate, about that fund. A sudden weight pressed against my ribs. What about it? They exchanged a glance. Mom cleared her throat. We already used it. I blinked. Used it? What do you mean? Dad spoke with that impatient tone he always used when I asked too many questions. 2 years ago, when Monica got married. We thought it would be more practical to help her settle down. A house, Kate. A real start for her family. You weren't engaged. You weren't even close. We honestly didn't think. He trailed off, but the words burned anyway. We didn't think you'd ever need it. I felt my cheeks go hot, my stomach twist like I'd been punched. That was mine. Nana left it for me. For both of us. She wanted us to have weddings she couldn't live to see. Mom shook her head, her voice sharp now. Oh, Kate. Don't be dramatic. Monica needed stability. You'll be fine without all the fuss. You've always been so independent. Independent. That word. It meant alone. It meant not worth investing in. I'm getting married, I whispered. My voice cracked. I needed that money. For the first time, Mom's face hardened. Well, it's gone. You'll have to make do. Don't expect us to bail you out just because you want to play bride now. And with that, she pulled the door closer to her body. I felt the edge of wood brush my arm. Then the click of the lock sliding into place. I stood there on the porch, staring at the peeling paint on the doorframe, the same one Nana used to lean against while she waved us inside after school. My engagement ring glinted like a cruel joke. My hands were trembling when I pulled out my phone. Steve answered on the second ring, his voice warm and excited. Hey, love. Did you tell them? I swallowed hard, tears choking me. Steve, we'll have to wait. The wedding. The fund is gone. My throat closed, but he understood. He always did. Silence hummed through the line. Then his steady voice, we'll find another way. Don't let them break this for us. I hung up and sank onto the porch steps, the sky blurring above me. That was the day my parents stole not just money, but my belief that I mattered to them. It was the day I realized they would always choose Monica. But what they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that their betrayal had lit something inside me. Something fierce. Something they couldn't steal. Because 2 years later, I had the wedding of my dreams. And not a single one of them was invited. Before I tell you how I made that happen, I want to ask you. What would you have done in my place? Would you have forgiven your parents for stealing your future, or would you have shown them what it feels like to be shut out? But to understand why I did what I did, why my wedding became the sharpest form of revenge, I need to take you back. Back to the house where I grew up. Back to the years when love was rationed in a way I didn't understand, parceled out unevenly like slices of cake, always bigger for my sister and smaller for me. From as far back as I can remember, Monica was the star. She was the golden child, the one my parents paraded at family gatherings, the one whose report cards were taped proudly to the fridge. 2 years older than me, and always 2 steps ahead, Monica seemed to shine without effort. If she brought home a drawing from art class, Mom framed it. If I brought home a drawing, Mom said, "That's nice, Katie. Put it on your desk." It wasn't that they hated me. It was subtler than that. They just didn't see me. At school recitals, Dad's camcorder always zoomed in on Monica's face, catching every smile, every hair toss. When I had my first piano solo, I remember scanning the crowd, desperate for their eyes. But they were already busy whispering about Monica's dress, about how grown-up she looked. That's the kind of childhood I had, present, but not important. Reliable, but never celebrated. The only person who noticed the difference, who made me feel like I was more than Monica's understudy, was Nana. My grandmother, my mom's mother, was a force of nature. She had inherited a small business from her parents, a cozy gift shop on Main Street, and she ran it with equal parts steel and charm. People loved her. She knew everyone in town by name, and she carried herself like a queen who didn't need a throne. Nana was the kind of woman who believed in gestures. Every Christmas, she gave Monica and me matching velvet dresses and told us, "You're my princesses." Never forget that. She wasn't naive, she knew my parents played favorites. Sometimes I caught her narrowing her eyes when Mom bragged only about Monica. But Nana had her own way of balancing the scales. When I was 15 and Monica 17, Nana sat us down in her parlor. The air smelled like lavender and old wood polish, the way her house always did. Her hands trembled a little as she held out 2 cream-colored envelopes. "I want you both to have something," she said. "I may not live to see your weddings, but I want to be there in spirit. So I've created a wedding fund, $50,000 each. Enough to make sure you shine on your big day." Her eyes glistened. "You both deserve to walk into your future like queens, not worrying about money." I didn't know how to respond. At 15, $50,000 sounded like a fairy tale. Monica giggled, already imagining designer gowns. I just nodded, tucking the envelope into my lap like it was too holy to touch. Nana passed away not long after. The fund was real, set up in accounts with my parents as trustees. Monica and I couldn't access a penny until we married, and only with our parents' signatures. Nana had trusted them to be fair. I wish she hadn't. Fast forward 10 years. Monica was 25 when she got engaged to some financial analyst with perfect teeth and an even more perfect family pedigree. The wedding was everything you'd expect from a golden child's fairy tale, a silk gown dripping with crystals, a ballroom filled with roses, a 5-tier cake that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. I remember sitting at the reception table, Steve's hand warm over mine. We had just started dating then, he was still new, still nervous, still trying to figure out how to fit into my family's strange dynamics. The chandeliers glowed above us, champagne glasses clinked, and Monica twirled on the dance floor like a Disney princess brought to life. My parents glowed with pride. Every toast was about how radiant she was, how she was destined for this kind of happiness. I clapped when everyone else clapped. I smiled when the photographer swept by. But inside, I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not jealousy, not exactly. Just the sharp awareness that when my day came, I would have to fight twice as hard to be seen. Maybe that's why I gravitated toward Steve. He wasn't flashy or loud. He didn't care about impressing anyone. He believed in hard work, in building something brick by brick. We dreamed small at first. A coffee cart outside the commuter station. Then a food truck that served breakfast sandwiches. Eventually, we scraped together enough to open a modest café in a corner of town no one else wanted. The rent was cheap, the neighborhood was rough around the edges, but we saw possibility where others saw nothing. It wasn't glamorous. I worked 14-hour days, collapsing into bed with flour still in my hair. Steve kept the books by hand because we couldn't afford software. We painted the walls ourselves, second-hand rollers squeaking, laughing until our arms ached. But it was ours. It was the first time in my life I felt like I was building something no one could take from me. Even during those exhausting years, I kept one dream tucked away like a folded photograph, my wedding. I imagined myself in a simple but stunning dress, walking toward Steve, surrounded by everyone who mattered. Not just a practical ceremony, but a moment of joy, of triumph. A day where I wouldn't be the other daughter. I would be the bride. And I held on to the belief that Nana had made that possible. That when the time came, her gift would help me create the day she'd wanted for both her granddaughters. I pictured the cafe thriving, the ring on my finger, the fund released into my hands with a signature. I pictured my parents smiling, maybe even proud that I had built something steady before marriage. I thought, finally, they'll see me. What I didn't know, what I couldn't even imagine as I scrubbed counters at midnight or carried trays to the early morning rush, was that my parents had already decided I didn't deserve that dream. That while I was busy laying bricks for my future, they were busy writing me out of theirs. That my fund wasn't waiting for me at all. It was gone. Spent. Converted into a gift for Monica's new life. But I wouldn't learn that until 2 years later. On the very day I came to them, heart bursting with joy, to announce my engagement to Steve. That was the day they showed me exactly where I stood. And that was the day my revenge began. I don't think I will ever forget the emptiness that settled inside me after my parents told me the truth. It wasn't anger at first. It wasn't even sadness. It was something colder, heavier, like standing inside an abandoned house with no walls, no roof, just silence where your life should be. For weeks, I walked through each day like a ghost. I would get up, pull my hair back, put on my apron, and go through the motions at the cafe, but inside, I felt like I had been hollowed out. I had spent years telling myself that maybe, just maybe, my parents would see me the way Nana had. That they would recognize how hard I worked, how much I cared, how much I had sacrificed. That when it mattered, they would treat me like I was worth something. And then, with a single sentence, they erased all of it. The money wasn't just gone. The faith, the trust, the small fragile belief that I had a place in their love, that was gone too. Steve tried to pull me back from the edge. He sat me down the night after I found out, took both my hands in his, and said, "Kate, listen to me. We don't need them. We don't need their money, their approval, any of it. Let's just go to the courthouse. Tomorrow. We'll sign the papers, we'll be married, and we'll move on. It's you I want, not the wedding." For a moment, I wanted to say yes. I wanted to give in to the simplicity of it, to let his love erase the betrayal. But the words caught in my throat, bitter and sharp. "No, Steve," I whispered. "If we do that, they win. Monica wins. My parents win. They'll look at us and say, 'See? She didn't deserve more. She never needed it. Monica was the one who was worthy.'" My voice cracked. I am so tired of losing. I am so tired of being the one left behind. Steve didn't argue. He just pulled me against his chest and said, "Then we fight. Not with them, but for us. We'll build the life they don't believe you can have." That became my anchor in the months that followed. The pain didn't go away, it sank deeper. I'd lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, my chest aching, hearing my grandmother's voice echo in my memory, "You're my princesses. Both of you. You deserve to shine." She had believed in me when no one else did. And now her promise had been stolen, turned into bricks and furniture and patio furniture for a daughter she hadn't loved more, but whom my parents had chosen anyway. Meanwhile, Monica moved into her new house. The house that was supposed to have been my wedding. She decorated every inch of it like she was styling a magazine shoot. And she made sure the world saw it. Her Instagram became a shrine to her new life, sunlight streaming across a sparkling white kitchen, selfies on the front porch with a glass of champagne, hashtags like family first and new beginnings. Each post felt like a blade slipping between my ribs. Because I knew, even if no one else did, whose sacrifice had paid for it. And my parents, they never let me forget it. They called occasionally, as though nothing had happened, and every conversation was another twist of the knife. "You should see Monica's garden, Kate. The roses are just stunning. Her neighborhood is so quiet, it's perfect for raising a family. She just redid the kitchen. Granite countertops, of course." They weren't sharing news. They were reminding me, over and over again, that I was nothing. That my wedding had become Monica's fireplace, Monica's patio, Monica's dream home. I stopped answering most of their calls, but silence didn't heal me. It just deepened the wound. And so I worked. The café became more than a business. It became my armor. Steve and I threw ourselves into it with everything we had. We cut every comfort, every luxury. We lived off leftovers, wore clothes until they tore, skipped holidays and birthdays. Our lives shrank down to one goal, survival. Mornings started at 5 a.m. I would drag myself into the cold air, hands aching, to pick up sacks of flour and bags of coffee beans. By 7, the ovens glowed, trays of muffins steamed on the counter, and the first customers trickled in, commuters with tired eyes, nurses stumbling off night shifts, students clutching textbooks like lifelines. I memorized their names, their orders, their stories. In a strange way, they became my family. They saw me, even if my parents never had. By evening, I was a shell. My back ached, my feet throbbed, and my hands cracked from scrubbing counters and lifting trays. Steve would sit with the books, his brow furrowed, while I wiped down every surface until my knuckles stung. Sometimes exhaustion made us snap at each other, sharp words cutting through the silence. But every fight ended the same way, with him pulling me close, reminding me we were in this together. He never once doubted me. And that belief was the one thing my parents could never steal. The victories were small, almost invisible at first. A commuter recommended us to his office, and suddenly we were catering meetings. A local food blogger wandered in one afternoon, wrote a glowing review, and by the weekend we had a line stretching out the door. I'll never forget the first night I counted the register and saw numbers that made my chest swell. It wasn't joy I felt. It was defiance. Because every cent was mine. Earned. Untouchable. Still, Monica's shadow hovered. Her life unfolded like a curated magazine spread. Garden parties, redecorated rooms, perfectly staged selfies in the house that should have been my wedding fund. And my parents fueled it, calling with their endless comparisons. They dangled her happiness in front of me like bait, as if waiting for me to break. But I didn't. I swallowed the bitterness, and I turned it into fuel. That didn't mean it didn't hurt. There were nights I locked the cafe doors, sat on the back steps, and let myself cry until I couldn't breathe. Nights when I whispered into the dark, why wasn't I enough? But every morning, I got up. I put my apron back on. I kept going. 2 years passed like that. 2 years of exhaustion, of sacrifice, of growing stronger through the silence. 2 years of Monica's smiling face haunting my feed while I scraped batter off pans at midnight. By the time I turned 28, the cafe wasn't just surviving. It was thriving. We had loyal customers, a reputation beyond our neighborhood, and enough savings to finally breathe. Steve and I talked about opening a second location. For the first time since my parents stole from me, I could see the future again. And I knew one thing with absolute certainty: I would have my wedding. It would not be small. It would not be rushed. It would be radiant, unforgettable, a day that proved I was never the nothing my parents had treated me as. But they would never see it. Neither my parents, nor Monica, nor anyone who had stolen from me would step inside that room. Because my revenge wasn't about shouting. It wasn't about lawsuits or demands. It was about silence. It was about exclusion. It was about building a life so bright it burned in their absence, and then locking the door in their faces. They thought they had taken my wedding forever. But what they had really done was give me fire. And that fire was going to light the day that should have been mine all along. For years, I had told myself that I would not let my parents or Monica define me. And finally, I had proof that I had one. The cafe wasn't just paying bills anymore, it was thriving. We had lines every morning, regulars who swore they couldn't start their day without us, and a second location in the works. For the first time since Steve slipped the ring on my finger, I could breathe without fear. I could dream again. And so we decided to do it. We decided to give ourselves the wedding that had been stolen from me. Not just any wedding. Not a quiet courthouse signature. Not a rushed ceremony in someone's backyard. We were going to have the wedding. The kind of event that turned heads, that set tongues wagging, that made people whisper for months afterward. The Grand Meridian Hotel had always been the stuff of dreams in our town: grand chandeliers, sweeping staircases, a ballroom glittering with crystal and gold. Couples took pictures on its marble steps just to pretend they belonged there. And now, after years of blood and sweat, I was booking it. The news spread fast. Vendors whispered that Kate and Steve were planning something unbelievable. Our florist told me customers were asking what the theme would be. My dress designer admitted that strangers had tried to sneak into her studio just to catch a glimpse. It was all anyone could talk about. Did you hear about Kate's wedding? They say it's going to be the event of the year. For once in my life, I wasn't in Monica's shadow. I was the shadow. I was the subject of envy, of fascination, of anticipation. Of course, the rumors reached my parents and Monica. They always did. My father was the first to call. His voice was clipped, as always. "Kate, don't you think you're overdoing it? You've been with Steve for years already. Why waste money on such a spectacle? You could just go to the courthouse and be done." I almost laughed at the irony. That was exactly what they had told themselves when they stole my fund, that I didn't need a wedding, that Monica's future mattered more than mine. "We're not wasting money," I told him calmly. "We're celebrating what we built." My mother chimed in, her tone laced with sugar that couldn't hide the bitterness. "Oh, sweetheart, people will talk. They'll say it's too much. They'll say you're showing off." Good, I thought. Let them talk. Monica was less subtle. She posted little jabs on social media, memes about couples who waste fortunes on parties instead of investing in their future, captions like "Marriage is about love, not flowers," and chandeliers, conveniently paired with selfies in her stolen house. Her friends commented, "So true, Mon. You're the practical one." And she basked in it, as if mocking me could erase the fact that the whole town was buzzing about my wedding, not hers. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because the truth was, for once, Monica was the one watching me. Watching, wondering, desperate to know what it would be like to be in my shoes. As the date drew closer, the pressure mounted. Relatives posted about receiving their invitations, golden envelopes sealed with our initials, invitations that shimmered with the promise of something unforgettable. Everyone compared them, shared them, bragged about them. Everyone except my parents. I knew the moment would come, and when it did, it was almost too perfect. My phone rang late one evening. My mother's voice was sharp, her patience gone. "Kate, we've been waiting for our invitation. All of your cousins have theirs. Even your aunt in Chicago called us about hers. Why is ours taking so long? My father grabbed the phone next. Enough of these games, Kate. It's embarrassing. People are asking questions. Why are we still waiting? Their indignation, their desperation, it was like champagne on my tongue. For once, I wasn't the daughter begging for scraps of love. They were the ones left waiting, excluded, uncertain. They were the ones standing on the outside. I let the silence stretch, savoring it. Then I said lightly, "Don't worry. Just wait a little longer. I'm sure it will all become clear soon." And I hung up, smiling to myself, knowing that the sweetest revenge wasn't shouting or accusing or reminding them of the money they stole. The sweetest revenge was letting them twist in the dark, watching as the whole world prepared for a wedding they would never be invited to. The morning of my wedding felt like a promise finally kept, one whispered to me years ago by a woman who believed I would shine when the time came. Light spilled over the facade of the Grand Meridian Hotel in pale gold, the kind of light that makes marble look like it's breathing. Florists hurried through the revolving doors with white peonies and quick, excited steps. A string quartet tuned in a side parlor, a harp thrummed like a heartbeat. When I stepped from the car, the doorman tipped his cap as if he'd been waiting all his life to greet me. For a second, I just stood there, the veil cool against my neck, the gown heavy the way good things are heavy, substantial, real, earned. Inside, the lobby gleamed. Polished floors mirrored chandeliers, bouquets climbed like small white storms up the grand staircase. Guests in black tie drifted past with the glossy ease of magazine pages come to life, and when they saw me, they smiled with something that looked like relief. People love when a story ends the way it was meant to. I heard my name again and again, felt hugs, kisses, perfume, the rustle of silk. You look incredible. This is the wedding of the year. Your grandmother would be so proud. That last one caught in my throat. I pressed my fingers to the locket tucked inside my dress and whispered, "Not a cent of theirs. All mine. All ours." Steve was waiting for me at the end of the aisle set under the ballroom's largest chandelier. He wore a midnight suit that turned his eyes a deeper blue, the kind of suit that says I am a man who shows up. When the music swelled, he looked at me the way he always had, like I was not a miracle but a fact, sturdy and certain. We said the vows we had written at our kitchen table after closing the café one night, hands sticky with sugar, eyelids heavy, hearts loud. I promised to be the safe place he could fall and the fire that keeps us moving. He promised to choose me when things were hard and to never let anyone tell me what I deserved again. There were cheers, there were clinking glasses, there were tears that glimmered like scattered diamonds under the chandelier. When he kissed me, the room lifted as if the air itself had exhaled. Dinner began with the kind of elegance you only see in films. Servers moved like choreography, silver domes lifted in a wave, candles flaming along mirrored runners. People leaned close to whisper it, the colors, the flowers, the band that slipped from jazz to soul, the cake like a cathedral of sugar behind glass. I could feel the city outside pressing its nose to the window. I could hear the rumor engine humming beyond the hotel walls. She did it. She made it. It's more beautiful than Monica's. It's more beautiful than anyone's. And then I stopped hearing it, because I was laughing with my husband, buttering a piece of bread, tasting champagne that sparkled like a plan coming true. The moment before it happened is stitched into me. I remember the fork in my hand, a tiny ring of light sliding down the tines. I remember my cousin's toast, warm, a little messy, perfect. I remember the quartet beginning a new song and the ballroom breathing in to listen. Then, from beyond the doors, a ripple, raised voices, hard as glass. A woman's shout. A man's bass, sharp and cutting. The unmistakable rhythm of entitlement, demand, disbelief, demand again. Steve felt me still. "You hear that?" he asked under his breath. "I do," I said, and set down my fork. A murmur moved through the tables as I walked. Guests turned, napkins stilled midway between plate and lap. The maitre d' appeared at my side, a shadow of courtesy. Miss, he murmured, my name, my married name, sweet as caramel, we've contained the disturbance in the foyer. Security is present. Say the word and we'll escort them off the premises. Let me see, I said. The doors to the ballroom opened as if the hotel itself were taking a breath. The foyer bloomed before me, high ceiling, gilded plasterwork, the polished table with its guest book and arrangement of white orchids, and in the center of it, like a stain, stood my parents and my sister with her husband. My mother's mouth was already open in a shape I knew too well, my father's hands were balled at his sides, Monica's face was that shining, furious copy of the past, the one she wore as a child when anything wasn't immediately hers. They saw me and all three voices came at once, a messy braid of grievance. How dare you, my mother cried, loud enough to pull the eyes of staff and passers-by. How dare you embarrass us like this? Your own family, standing outside like beggars. We've been at the door for 20 minutes, my father snapped, color rising up his neck. Everyone else is inside. Your aunts. Your cousins. Even your second cousins. We are the only ones without an invitation. This is unacceptable. Monica was the sharpest of them, as always. Is this what you wanted? She hissed, a mirthless smile cutting across her face. To make a scene? To prove you're better than us because you wasted a fortune on a party? The security chief, polite, solid, expensive, held a breath behind them with two staff. He looked to me, hands folded. Waiting for my choice. I don't know what expression I wore, but my voice was steady. Lower your voices, I said. You're disturbing my guests. Your guests? My mother spat, as if the phrase were an insult. We are your family. I stepped closer so that when I spoke, they could see the details they'd never cared to notice, the tiny gold thread at the edge of my veil, the callus near my thumb from kneading dough, the steadiness in my eyes I'd forged in 1,000 early mornings and late nights. Family is not a word you get to use as a key, I said, calm, clear. Not after you used mine as a crowbar. My father scoffed, trying to turn scorn into authority. Enough poetry, Kate. We're going in. This is childish. You've made your point. Now stop. Behind me, the ballroom doors had stayed partially open. I could feel the presence of the people I loved gathering in a crescent just inside, Steve, my cousins, friends from the café, the florist with a pin still between her lips, our baker, the quartet's cellist peering from his chair. The murmur grew, like wind through leaves. What's happening? What's wrong? Is she okay? You're not going in, I said. Monica laughed in that bright way she did when she wanted a room to choose her. We weren't invited? She pitched her voice higher, for the growing audience. Can you imagine? Her own sister, her own parents. The whole city is inside, and we're out here like strangers. This is humiliating. For you, I said simply. Not for me. My mother stepped forward, the same motion as that afternoon when she closed the door in my face, but this time there was no door she controlled, no history she could slam shut and make me vanish. We raised you, she said, trembling with a mixture of rage and drama she thought was love. We gave you everything. You took everything, I said. You took what wasn't yours to take. You stood in front of a gift meant for me and said she needs it more. And then you used my wedding to buy Monica a porch swing and a granite countertop and a life she could brag about while I scraped batter off pans at midnight. If you wanted to come here tonight, you should have kept your hands off what didn't belong to you. The words didn't echo, they landed. I watched them hit my father first. For a heartbeat he looked older, the bluster of his fury collapsing just enough to show the small man underneath who had done a small thing and told himself it was practical. My mother's chin lifted, she reached for indignation like a life raft. We made a decision for the family, she said. That's what parents do. We help the child who needs it most. You help the child you love most, I said, and it wasn't a shout, it was worse. It was a diagnosis. You didn't believe I would ever stand where I'm standing now. And when Steve asked me to marry him, you told me without saying a word that my future didn't count. You told me I was the spare, the scaffolding, the invisible wallet. You asked me to forgive you in advance by insisting it wasn't personal. It was. It always was. Monica's husband tugged at her elbow, but she yanked free. This is pathetic, she said, eyes glittering. You're still that jealous little girl. You think this party proves something? You think a ballroom and a dress make you more than me? No, I said, and smiled, because the truth tasted like victory. This party doesn't prove I'm more than you. It proves I'm not less. It proves I didn't need what you stole to get here. I built a life from empty hands and long nights. I paid for every candle in that room. I paid for every note the quartet plays. And if you want to know why you don't have an invitation, it's because tonight is not for thieves and accomplices. Tonight is for the people who held me up when you let me fall. The sound behind me shifted, soft gasps, a few murmured yeses, someone's handclap quickly smothered. Steve had stepped into the doorway now, not to save me, not to pull me away, but to stand where I could see him if I needed to. I didn't. But God, I loved that I could. My mother's eyes flooded, weapon and reflex in one. You can't do this, she whispered, tears like beads on a string. What will people think? That I finally learned to guard the door to my life, I said. That I understand family means safety, not entitlement. That I know the difference between forgiveness and letting someone steal from you twice. My father recovered a little swagger. We'll stand right here then, he said, planting himself. We'll talk to your guests as they come out. We'll tell them what kind of daughter you are. I tipped my chin toward the guest book. The pens were laid out in a neat row like soldiers. The orchids glowed. They already know what kind of daughter I am, I said. They came because of her. The woman who left 2 envelopes and asked the people in charge to be fair. You turned her gift into a weapon, and tonight I'm turning your weapon into a wall. He blinked, confused, then angry again. I turned to the security chief. Mr. Weller, please escort these 4 individuals off the property. If they resist, call the police. They are not invited, and they are disrupting my wedding. My mother made a small sound I had heard only once before, the day I left for college, and she realized I was going without asking her what I should pack. It wasn't grief, it was the horror of losing control. You wouldn't dare, she said now, but the edges of her voice had gone soft with doubt. I held her gaze. I dare. Weller stepped forward with 2 staff. His gentleness was expensive, his firmness more so. Sir, ma'am, he said, nodding to my parents, I'll need you to come with me. He turned to Monica and her husband. The same applies to you. My parents began to talk all at once, threats, pleas, a tangle of accusations, but the sound was already threadbare. Monica tried one last gambit, loud enough for the watching faces in the doorway. You're going to regret this, Kate. Everyone will see who you really are. I looked at her, my sister, the girl who had always been the main character in a play I wasn't allowed to audition for. They see me now, I said. That's the problem, isn't it? Weller guided them gently toward the revolving doors. As they moved, my father twisted to look at the ballroom, at the slice of gold and laughter visible through the gap. My mother reached for the doorframe as if it might split itself into mercy. Monica tossed her hair like the finale of a scene and tried to make her face a mask of pity. It read as fear. When the outer doors closed behind them, the foyer exhaled. The orchids looked whiter. The air settled. For a moment, no one moved. Then I turned back toward the ballroom. The faces that had gathered there weren't hungry for scandal. They were tender, I think. Proud. A few were wet with tears they hadn't meant to show. A hush rippled through them, a silence like velvet. Steve stepped forward and took my hand. His palm was warm. My heart, which had been beating with that metallic adrenaline rhythm, softened into something human again. I cleared my throat and spoke, not loudly, but the room heard me. I'm sorry for the interruption, I said, and realized I wasn't sorry at all. Thank you for being here, for believing in us. Tonight is for love we earned and love we chose. Let's go back in and dance. There was a sound then, the good kind, the kind that carries you, applause like rain after a dry season, laughter, the scrape of chairs as people turned back to joy. Someone called out, "We love you, Kate," and the whole room agreed in one warm, ridiculous cheer. The maitre d' closed the doors, the music swelled back to life. Steve brushed his thumb along my cheek, and I realized my face was damp. Not with grief. With relief. With the knowledge that my wedding was what I had promised myself it would be, not a performance for those who doubted me, but a celebration with those who didn't. When we returned to our table, dessert waited like a glittering tableau, tiny lemon tarts with sugared flowers, chocolate cups filled with silk, a slice of the sugar cathedral cake poised like a first page. The band shifted into something bright, guests surged onto the dance floor. Steve took my hand and pulled me into the center. People opened around us like a tide, the chandelier threw constellations into my veil. We danced. We laughed. We let the hours loosen their grip and slide, sweet and slow. The cousins who had watched in the doorway earlier now hooped and spun. The florist danced with the baker. The quartet's cellist slipped onto the floor with his bow in his back pocket like a party trick. Someone started a conga line. Someone's toddler toddled through like a prince. It was messy, radiant, human. Later, much later, when the last sparkler hissed down to a thread of smoke and the hotel's night breathed quieter, Steve and I stood alone for a moment at the threshold of the ballroom. The tables were a confetti of petals and empty glasses. The orchids in the foyer still held, the guest book was filled with names written like blessings. "You okay?" he asked softly. I thought of the door my mother had shut. I thought of the revolving doors that had turned and carried them out. I thought of the girl who had once stood on a porch and believed that was the end of her story. "Yes," I said. "I'm more than okay." He kissed my forehead. "You were perfect." "I wasn't," I said, and smiled. I was precise. We stepped into the hallway, and I looked back one last time. Not at the chandeliers or the flowers or the mirrors that had loved me all night. At the space itself. At the room where I had taken my life back in the only language my parents ever understood, doors, lists, names, the arithmetic of inclusion and exclusion. It wasn't cruelty. It was clarity. Outside, the city had shifted to its softest hour. The car waited. The doorman tipped his cap again, this time with the conspirator's smile of a man who has kept a secret and enjoyed it. As we drove away, the Grand Meridian's lights fell behind us like a curtain finally settling at the end of a play. The next morning, my phone buzzed with messages, photos, laughter, love. There were a few from numbers I recognized and did not open. There was one from an aunt who had hesitated to take sides and finally had. "Proud of you," she wrote. "Proud of the woman you became." I sat on the hotel bed with my legs tucked under me and let myself cry. Not because it hurt. Because it didn't anymore. People will say revenge is a poison you swallow to kill someone else. Maybe. But sometimes revenge is a boundary drawn in gold leaf. Sometimes it is a door you keep shut not out of hate, but out of respect for the person you finally learned to be. My parents taught me how to build a wall when they turned my inheritance into Monica's wallpaper. I just learned to build mine facing the right direction. By afternoon, the city was telling a new story, that the wedding had been everything people said and more, that the bride had glowed, that the groom had looked at her like he'd won the only prize that mattered. Nobody talked about a scene in the foyer for long. People prefer light to heat. And my life, finally, was full of light. That night, Steve and I walked into our café with our shoes in our hands and the smell of sugar still in our hair. The staff had left a note on the espresso machine, "Congrats, bosses." And beneath it, a lopsided heart. I set my bouquet in a pitcher behind the counter and thought, my wedding wasn't bought. It was baked, brewed, lifted, built. It was ours. And somewhere across town, in a house paid for with what should have been my day, my parents and sister sat together and asked themselves how their daughter could have excluded them from the one thing that should have included them by default. The answer was simple, and I hoped they found it. They had locked me out first. I just learned to turn the bolt. When the lights went out and the cafe hummed its nighttime hum, Steve tugged me close. "Ready for our forever?" he asked. "I've been ready," I said, and meant it. Because for the first time since I was 15 and a woman with lavender hands pressed an envelope into mine, I felt exactly like what she promised I would be. I felt like a princess. No, not a princess. A queen who learned to guard her own gates.